Because I got in a panic and I remember getting He's about to hit the gap. If I turn my head, I might. Ready?
Call this meeting to order. Zebulon Board of Commissioners work session, 5/26/2022. Is there an approval of the agenda?
I make a motion we approve the agenda.
I second. There's been a motion and second. All approve. Motion passes. We'll recognize the town manager. Budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight is your third budget work session, so a brief outline of what staff will present to you tonight. First, on the capital budget, we will provide you an overall update on what happened with the transportation funds from last year as a lead-in to transportation requests this year. We presented the Parks capital improvement budget at your second work session, but you all had some questions, and so Sheila Long, the Parks and Rec Director, is here to follow up on those questions. And then we'll provide an overall presentation of where things were as far as the fleet request last year as a way to guide you for the fleet request this year. And then on the operating budget, we'll open up for any questions, comments, or requests that you have regarding the administrative, the governing board, or the finance budgets that were submitted to you last week. We also have some information to give to you that was requested either at the first work session or the second work session, specifically the salary comparisons of what employees with the town of Zebulon are making compared within our labor shed. Labor shed, once again, is a place where an employee can drive to another place of employment. And then, as we've done with the first two work sessions, we'll open it up to public input. Capital budget will first focus on the transportation capital budget from last year. And no, you're not expected to be able to read this off the screen. That's why we've given you a handout of last year's capital budget. We'll guide you through this as a way to both update you on the projects, but also as a way to guide you so you can understand how the expenditures and the revenues look for the FY23 budget. So going back to the FY22 budget, we dedicate the vehicle tag fee and the POW bill, which is also known as the gas tax. We dedicate that to our annual street resurfacing project. So we did that with last year's budget. You'll get an update on that project as well as what will be recommended for next year's project from the Public Works Director. Then as you move down that spreadsheet, you'll see the subcategory for intersection improvements. That represents the big signal work that we are doing. So the North Arundel green pay signal. Last year we budgeted another $150,000 to represent the next phase of work. The phase of work that we're doing right now is its last phase before we go to construction. And the same is true for Shepherd School, Old Bun. We put the $350,000 in there to cover the last of the design and the permitting and the right-of-way acquisition. The Judd and North Arundel signal, that was for the fire signal. Obviously, that has not been designed yet. That will be part of the fire station design process. So you'll see that in the FY23 budget as a rollover expense. Then moving down to the thoroughfare improvement subcategory, you'll see where we put $340,000 in for the Jones Street connector. That was intentionally under budgeted with the expectation that we would have private development come along and contribute to that. That private development did not move forward. We received the bids for that and we did not award that project. North Arundel widening phase one, we put additional money in there to cover a couple of things. One is there's a gap between where the phase one of North Arundel ends and some private development that is occurring specific, so there's a gap there. So we added some money in there to incorporate that part into the design so there wouldn't be a gap. Also, we've been able to utilize those funds because DOT has given us permission to skinny up the right-of-way, so to speak, so some more problematic right-of-way acquisitions we can potentially avoid. And then we had some conversion of streetlights to LED, and then we had some remaining funds left over. And so as a way to not have a spend it or lose it mentality, but also to be frugal, we've set up a series of reserve accounts. Transportation is one of those. And so we specified the remaining funds to go into the transportation reserve. As far as the revenue sources, we have that dedicated property tax, so we used a portion of that 5 cents. Again, the motor vehicle tag fee, as well as the gas tax or the PAL bill that gets funded to street paving. We dipped into fund balance. We also collected and used a portion of the transportation impact fees that were collected. The street capital reserves, that was money that we dipped into, so those are the savings, and so that's where the revenue sources were from. So that's an overview of where we are with last year's budgeted projects, as well as a guide to just understand where the revenues and the expenditures go. And I'll use that as a lead-in to recognize Chris Ray to talk about where we are on some of those major projects.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. Tonight we come from you, I'd like to talk a little bit of where we are, like Joe said, where we are on the transportation projects. I assume that's right, yeah. Just give you an update. Last time I was in front of you, we had the 2022 roadway and storm drainage project bid award. Y'all awarded that construction to Naren Construction. Naren has accepted that bid, and we are tentatively projecting a July 11th notice to proceed on that. And just a reminder for you that we will be paving the 100 block of East Vance Street, Yates Place, Wellington Drive, Southland Drive, and just a refresher that these are all based on pavement condition ratings, a PCR. So we were addressing the 4 worst streets in town based on our ratings done internally by staff, and our contractor will begin addressing those. As we get closer into June, we'll be providing notices to the public along these streets that there will be some temporary delays and maybe a little bit of inconvenience due to the milling and the resurfacing, but we hope that it'll be short-lived. And so there'll be more information going out through handouts, flyers, describing what we're doing, and then clearly be a significant amount of information posted on social media. So a project we're looking forward to that is upcoming.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely, ma'am.
Will you be doing the replacement of the pipe under East Vance before you do all the paving?
Yes, ma'am. East Vance
Okay,
Street.
I just want to make sure.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We have already previously talked to the contractor. He is currently going to be tackling that work first and completing those new 4 parallel storm drainage lines, and then we'll bring the miller in and pave afterwards. Yes, ma'am.
Chris, the $330,000, where am I finding that on this sheet, or is it not?
This is just, I reflected here, the 330 is just the construction cost. Also, I don't believe that piece may not have been updated to the budget amendments we had adjusted for bids coming in from last year. So this is the amount we're spending on the construction-related costs for the project.
And this is going to go under the street resurfacing for FY22?
That is correct, ma'am.
So FY22 street resurfacing, the recommended was 220, but we're going to be spending 330?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. When you awarded the bid, we done a budget amendment to recognize those additional funds.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand that because it's not reflected on this.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And you said the contractor is Naren?
Naren Contracting, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move forward with next year's payment? Hearing none. Wanted to, like we said, we do annual rating of the streets. They vary from year to year based on weather. The biggest piece that I've seen historically that's going to affect it is weather. Whether the freeze-thaw effect of snow and ice. Clearly, traffic volume does have an impact on it. But based on the overall conditioning rating, we have a weighted average for all the town streets of a 90.7. That basically puts you at the really good, excellent rating for your streets section. One thing you want to keep in mind in regards to this, we have a significant amount of new streets that we've added in the last 3 years, so it skews it a little bit, but basically we still are doing a really good job of planning and preservation of our streets. Just to look at the chart, we do have 7% that is considered poor, and those are those 5 streets that you list there on your left side of the screen is the ones that make up the 7%. Those are the ones we are recommending to pave next year. And so as we go forward in the budget process, we'll be building a bid package to put out on the street for these to bid. But just to give you an overall update where we at and where we stand in regards to our street conditioning.
So on the, maybe I'm not supposed to be looking at this spreadsheet because on this spreadsheet it says 288,000.
The sheet that you're looking at on the left is the budgeted numbers. And so on the project that we just awarded, those bids came in higher than what is listed in the budgeted amount. So we did a budget adjustment.
Right.
To the right is the capital improvement plan. So that's the expectation of what we expect the revenues to come in and what the expenditures are to be, but they're just a projection. So that's why it's a plan and not a budget. So what you have been handed in your binder, that is going to be reflected in the budget. So the handouts that you've got right now represent last year's projections. What's in your binder is what's this year's budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions about the condition of our current infrastructure in regards to streets?
Once we get past resurfacing the streets that have the 70 and less, pardon me, PCR, then we are going to be then starting to address the ones that are currently rated as moderate.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. One of the things we would love to do is as we get these poor streets taken off the registry is to go into a preservation mode where we start putting in more work on slurries, cape seals, crack sealing, so we can actually preserve those roads to make them last longer. One of the techniques we done several years ago, for example, a slurry will add approximately 7 years of useful life to a street because it basically seals it and prevents the water and freezing thaw happening and shifting the street. So once we take care of those, we really want to move to a more of a preservation mode. And that's our goal. That's what we're working toward. Good question. Others? Before we move on. All right. This project here we want to talk to you a little bit about is the North Randall and Green Page Roadway and Signal Project. Just to give you a little reference here, we are adding a northbound left turn lane and a southbound turn lane. We'll be widening this all the way back to Popeyes. It really doesn't show up on this shot I provided here, but back to where the Popeyes will be widening their roadway. We're adding in the signal. We're controlling access here at a DOT request by putting in what we call a pork chop, which allows movements only right in, right out. We're also controlling access by putting a new curb along this area right here to control access and to push people away, farther away from the intersection before entering to this property here. So clearly a signal here, turn lane here, turn lane at this direction, and we'll be widening on both sides to create those tapers to transition to those. At this time, we have been through the process with NC DOT with reviews at 30%, 60%, and 90%. Their 90% drawings have been reviewed and commented on. The 90% signal drawings are in comments right now. We have been working closely with the city of Raleigh on a utility relocation. We have a water line that is a 12-inch water line that runs on the north side of, the east side of Rendell Avenue in this area that due to we're sloping new ditch into there, the cover on the existing line will need to, it's not sufficient, so it has to be relocated. So we're working through the city of Raleigh with that. We have coordinated with NC DOT about removing an existing light pole, and we're also coordinating with NC DOT Duke Energy, I apologize. To relocate the light pole is Duke Energy, and we're also working with them to set back the existing lights that are lighting the streets. We have applied for erosion control permits through the state and received them. And one of the good things about this project, there is no easement acquisition. We're able to perform all this work within right-of-way. When we move to the next project, it is significantly more complicated, but this one's a fairly straightforward road widening, and it's just a timely process to go through the multiple reviews with NCDOT. Just a reminder, y'all approved a signal agreement with NCDOT. Once we're completed and they accept this work, they will accept all the maintenance for the roadway and the signal, and the costs associated with the monthly electrical bill for that signal. So once these improvements are made, there'll be a responsibility for NCDOT to maintain.
So they're going to accept responsibility the same way that they accept responsibility for the rest of the roads in our town that they don't do work on?
They will maintain them to their standards, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? All right. Let's talk about what's the next steps and where we're at in regards to this project. Based on the progress we're at this time, we believe we're a late fall, early winter timeframe, so we went ahead and just basically called it a winter project for 2022 to put it out on the street. We feel like the bidding process will take us approximately 45 to 60 days, 1 to 2 months, between the award process, getting to on your calendar and giving you an opportunity to review the bids. It take up to 2 months. Notice to proceed is expected time we get under contract. It'll be spring of 2023, and the construction time frame is 6 months. So we're looking summer, late summer, early fall of 2023 to have this project complete. So I know everybody thinks these things ought to move quickly, but unfortunately they do not. I wish we could move quicker. It is a much needed project, and I've heard a lot of positive comments that we are working on this. They just wish it could be faster, and so do I. So, any questions?
I'm sorry, maybe just the people on the side, the Volker Summit, are these the?
These are the consulting engineers for the project. Yes, Volker is our primary consultant. They're handling roadway widening. Summit is handling the signals, and Green Engineering was handling surveying and erosion control.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Hearing no further questions, we'll talk about Old Bun Road and Shepherd School Road. In terms of complexity, they are entirely different. As you can see with this project here, we are doing significant upgrades. We're doing turn lanes, right turn lane, left turn lanes at all 4 intersections. So we're significantly widening the intersection here. We're putting signals here. We're having to relocate water lines, storm drainage lines, new curb and gutter, pedestrian crossings, and significantly on both directions. And to accomplish that, we're going to have to secure easements, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But from a design standpoint, this project is also at the 90% construction phase and is being reviewed by NCDOT from their roadway division and their signal division. We have 90% of the permitting complete, and when I say 90%, the only thing we're lacking is erosion control permit. And to get the final erosion control permit, I need easements in hand. They will not issue the permit till I have easements in hand. The permitting on this job is significantly more than the other projects. We have a blue line stream here. We had to get a nationwide 404 and 401 permit from the Division of Water Quality. We are having some stream impacts which caused us to have to buy some mitigation bank credits. So the amount of work here is significantly greater than North Arundel. But again, we're moving along fairly quickly. I'm happy with our consultants, WSP, on their progress. And, to talk a little bit about, I guess, the property acquisition, we've hired Telex. Telex has reached out to the 6 property owners, and there's 8 parcels that we're trying to secure. We have an estimated value of about $165,000. Telex will be serving as our right-of-way agent, working with us to negotiate whether it's a right-of-way, whether it's drainage easements, whether it's aerial easements, public drainage easements. We have the whole rainbow of types of easement we need to secure on this project. And I will stop there and see if we have any questions before we move forward. Yes, sir.
Was there any consideration about a roundabout here, or not even on the table?
No, there was some early on in our preliminary planning. Our traffic engineers felt like a signal intersection here was the best for movement of traffic and the volume and stuff. But yes, that was an early consideration we looked at. Any other questions?
Give me a little bit of breakdown, just a small breakdown of the full permit. You said full permit, different things like that?
Basically, it's a process you go through with the Division of Water Quality. Basically, it says there we are going to have stream impacts, and we'll be working on the stream to put in additional culverts and head walls and stuff like that. So it's just a process regarding erosion control measures and make sure we do things in a proper and safe and environmentally friendly process.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And I apologize, sometimes I get in the weeds too much. My boss is going to probably get on me about that when we finish, but it's a habit. It's hard to get away from. So, any other questions? All right. Let's move forward. All right, let's talk about timeframes. Like we said, easement acquisition is underway. We anticipate that taking 4 to 6 months. We hopefully it goes smoothly as we work with these 6 parcel owners, property owners. We hope to go to bid in the spring of 2023. Same as the other project, bidding process 1 to 2 months. The award process 1 to 2 months. Notice to proceed fall of 2023. And the construction time frame on this, and due to the significant amount of additional work from storm drainage to curb and gutter, drop inlets, pedestrian signals, crosswalk, and just a much more asphalt roadway widening, we're anticipating this to take 8 to 9 months. Any questions about the schedule? And that wraps up my presentation, unless you have some other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
Okay, so when you look at the spreadsheet for the FY23, there's going to be some things that you will not see, and you will not see additional funds for either of these signal projects, and that's intentional. And the reason it's intentional is we haven't gotten to the construction phase yet. And so we need to complete property acquisitions. Now, while we are estimating $165,000, as you all have seen in other projects, that can vary depending upon what kind of an impact that we're making to the property. So we're going to get to the next phase. We're going to come to you mid-year with a budget appropriation once we know that we are ready to go to construction. The estimated revenue streams for these 2 projects, for the Green Pace and Arundel, will come out of your transportation impact fees, and the expected revenue stream for the Old Bun and Shepherd School will come out of both a small allocation, relatively small allocation out of general fund balance, and those fee in lieu payments, one of which you have already received. Other comment I wanted to, since Commissioner Laux brought this up, I think it's good general information. Roundabouts, it's a tool like any tool. They don't work in all locations. So it depends upon the traffic volume on each approach. It also depends upon the skew of the roads that come together. You've heard from me before that when you're talking about a signal, you start at $250,000. That's your starting point from a budget standpoint. When it comes to roundabouts, you start at $1 million. It's just you're taking up a lot more property and you're doing a lot more construction. You have a lot of widening coming into the front. So since Commissioner Laux brought that up, I thought that you might find that useful. So with that, I will now transition into parks. We already had the parks presentation, but there was some questions for follow-up, and so with that, I'll recognize Parks and Rec Director Sheila Long.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Thank you for having me back this evening to do some follow-up related to the Parks and Rec CIP presentation from last week. The first slide that I wanted to share with you is a park classification, and this is in response to some questions about Gill Street Park and whether or not bathrooms were appropriate at that park and how you would go about getting costs or associated with building bathrooms at Gill Street Park. And so the response we've prepared is to help understand what different park classifications are. And so I have shared with you a table, and this comes from the North Carolina Parks and Recreation Association. So they provide standards that our industry follows pretty systematically. They recognize that every community is different, and what works for some communities may not work for others. And so what may be in this general standard, your community may want to shift one way or the other. Generally speaking, though, these are your core classifications that would pertain to the town of Zebulon. And so you have your mini parks, your neighborhood parks, community parks, your natural areas, special use. Special use is going to be more of like your aquatics facility, a community center. It would also be our joint use parks because they're going to come with some special, considerations when you're dealing with those, as well as greenways. And so your slideshow gives you a general idea of amenities that come with those different park classifications. Gill Street Park, just as a context, Gill Street Park falls really in between a mini park and a neighborhood park. So the next slide we have is kind of where I'll show how it falls there. Typically, a mini park is less than an acre, whereas a neighborhood park is about 5 acres. Gill Street Park is just under 2 acres. And their service radius is pretty much less than a half a mile. So the intended service is that immediate neighborhood for that. And so the idea behind a neighborhood park is that you don't introduce items, you don't introduce amenities that would impact the neighborhood at large that it's not built for. So that's just some context of why it gives like a service radius. There's also level of service standards which are addressed in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan of general amenities or types of parks within a radius that you want your citizens to have access to be able to have a higher quality of life. And so this information, the best place I found it was another resource from the the National Parks and Recreation Association. You did just adopt your Play Zebulon Parks and Recreation Master Plan in September of 2021. That was a huge accomplishment. It is a system-wide vision. It sets the course of what you're going to do for parks and for recreation across your community, and it takes into consideration the makeup of your community and other resources for parks and recreation that may be on a regional, county, state, private realm. What's important to note is that this is Zebulon's first Parks and Rec Master Plan, which is very unique. You're a community that has strongly supported parks and recreation for a long time, and as many parks as you had already, for this to be your first Parks and Rec Master Plan, this is really your first chance to really take a high-level view of what you want your system to be. This plan is designed to last you 10 years. However, like the NRPA does, or the National Recreation Parks Association, I didn't say all the acronyms, but I got it there. So just as they do, our plan also recognizes that as our community grows, our community will change. And so some of the things that are currently in the Parks and Rec master plan are things that every year, as you budget, you need to readdress and you need to reevaluate. So our plan also does that. The current vision included a need for 4 additional neighborhood parks. So where Gill Street Park currently falls in between that mini and neighborhood park, it is not going to be the only one, and there's going to be 4 more. There's also a call for an additional community park, a downtown park, a multi-use facility, and 10 miles of greenway. All of that also includes, in addition to all of that, renovation and/or expansion of existing parks. So that's all additional parks or park-like facilities. Specific to a neighborhood park, based on the development of our master plan, these are the items that you would see. And so you would have site work and preparation, sidewalk and pathway renovations, potential crosswalks or additional sidewalks, play equipment, park amenities. Depending on where the park is placed, what amenities you put there, you would have to decide at that point. An enhanced park entry, park signage, landscape and stormwater mitigation, as well as public art installation. We did not, the plan was not built for neighborhood parks to include bathrooms. That's a decision we'll talk about here in a second.
What was that last part? What was the last part you said? I'm sorry.
We'll talk about the bathroom piece in just a second. The current master plan did not intend to put bathrooms at neighborhood parks, but we'll talk about that in just a second.
Thank you.
But to give you some context, just to develop the scope of work we just talked about, it's going to be $1 million, $235,000 for each new park in last fall dollars. You're going to multiply that by 4. So in last fall dollars, you're talking about over $5 million in neighborhood park development costs. Plus you've got design and permitting fees associated with that and contingency. So it was over $8 million total estimated for the addition of 4 new neighborhood parks in that scope of work. If you were to introduce bathrooms at neighborhood parks, it's a system-wide decision. It's not a decision we would recommend that you do on a single park basis because it is something that as you continue to move forward, people are going to look to, and so you're looking to set a standard as you move forward. So it's a system-wide decision, it's a policy decision. Considerations when you make that decision is how is it going to change the dynamic? And you go back to what is the intent of a neighborhood park and what's the impact of it. So as you revise what your vision of a neighborhood park is, that's something we encourage you consider how it's going to impact the dynamics, as well as the impact on operations and the impact on safety. So those are things that you would want to incorporate your fire department or your police department into conversations. If you're going to have certain types of amenities, there are conversations that we would want to address. And even as we build new parks, those are conversations that we would have. Is this a good location from a safety perspective? You don't want to build a neighborhood park in the very back of a community where it's in a corner and it's hidden and it doesn't have a lot of road frontage, because that's going to encourage situations where general park users might not feel safe. So those were conversations that you would consider. So my recommendation at this point is that if bathrooms at neighborhood parks is something you want to pursue, that there be an adoption of a policy after a discussion to really understand those considerations, and that it's something that you're going to update and implement system-wide, and it's going to require additional cost estimates to support that.
Sheila,
Yes, ma'am.
has there been any conversation about identifying where the 4 neighborhood parks will be?
Yes.
If I missed it, yeah, I can't see that.
It's in your master plan, excuse me.
Okay.
It is in your master plan, and I'm happy to sit down and go through that entire document with you because I know it's kind of cumbersome.
It is.
But this map, the 4 circle areas on the left, the one on the right is 5 County Stadium, so that's your possible future community park. But the other 4 green circles are all identified areas for neighborhood parks within that radius, and that is based on growth.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Are there any additional questions or comments you'd like to share?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So when you look at your FY23 budget on the parks, what you're going to see is only the most pressing needs budgeted. The expectation is that at your work sessions in August, September, and October, we will be able to provide you a better, maybe not audited, but a better assessment of how much you have actually collected in Parks and Recreation impact fees. So you can get an assessment of how, of all the other projects within the Parks and Rec Master Plan, how you want to prioritize them. And if you want to prioritize more than what will be funded by your Parks and Rec impact fee, what then do you put on a bond referendum? So you'll see a lot of blanks, and that's intentional to allow you time to prioritize what projects to move forward on at your work sessions this fall. As far as the fleet, we don't have a presentation for the FY23 budget, so what I'll recommend is take a look at the FY23 spreadsheet, and then if you've got a question about any of the vehicles or equipment that we have requested, you can look to the requested CIP worksheets, and you can get more detail on that. But let me talk a little bit about what we did last year, not only as a way to give you a update, but also to kind of help you work through the FY23 requests. So the big thing that I think is the takeaway when it comes to fleet is we've got 3 classes of vehicles or equipment. So we've got light duty, meaning that this is their replacement cycle. So we're replacing these types of vehicles that are in this class around every 5 years. Then we have a medium duty class, which is those vehicles that we're replacing at every 5 to 15 years. And then we have heavy duty vehicles that we're replacing at that are in excess of 15 years. When it comes to light duty, this is the type of vehicles that are more likely going to be associated with a passenger car. The police vehicles is primarily where we fund a lot of vehicles in this category. We also have passenger type of vehicles for other departments, and so this past year we used those departments that use the passenger vehicles under less heavier use than police, and so we entered into a program of leasing vehicles through Enterprise with the option that at the end of a certain time frame, 3 to 5 years, we would own that, or we could turn them in and get money for the sale and then recirculate. So you'll see Enterprise vehicles that seems to be working out so far, so good. You'll see in your budget that those monies are already allocated to the debt payments on the Enterprise fund, or the Enterprise vehicles. And then under patrol, you will see in the upcoming budget just a replacement, regular replacement of those patrol vehicles, as well as the additional vehicles associated with the police officers that were recommended in the budget. And then there was a request this past year for both a vehicle in the fire department as well as Public Works. Then when we go down into medium duty, these are 2 classes or 2 examples of vehicles that we have financed. The payloader we had financed previously, but the leaf truck is one that we financed through the passage of that solid waste fee, or that yard waste fee, excuse me. And then moving down to the heavy duty vehicles, the 1.7 cent property tax increase that was passed a few years ago, this goes to fund the loan payments on the ladder and the pumper. And the strategy is that the pumper will be paid off in 8 years, and that will be the time to replace another pumper, and so we'll close out one loan and start a new loan on the new pumper. Because we have deferred expenses from the period of 2009 to 2015, we fell out of cycle of a replacement, and so we've got another pumper that's going to have to be replaced before the end of that 8 years. And so the 1.7 cents not only goes to pay for the loan payments on the ladder and the pumper, but it's a little bit that we get to put into reserve so that we can buy the next pumper that's going to come online in 6 years just outright. And then there's some equipment needs that we purchased. The UTV that was in there that was originally put in the recommended budget, we ended up not needing that, and so that got pulled out of the budget. There was a donation from East Wake EMS. You'll see in the FY23 budget where we are augmenting that UTV and making it available so that we can do rescues with that vehicle. The details of that are going to be on the worksheet. And then as we did, and I showed you on the transportation fund, we're not pushing to spend money or lose it. If we don't need the money, we lock it up into reserve. So the fleet and equipment reserve is just an example of that. As far as where the funds came from, again, we've got a dedicated property tax, but we also have dedicated property tax specifically for the fire vehicles. Because we are a county cost share with Wake County, they support us on a proportional share of our costs, and so that's shown there. We did dip into general fund balance, and then the estimated yard waste fee that we expected to collect was shown there at $150,000. So that's the revenue streams. Again, I'm not going to get into what this truck does or what this vehicle does. I'll leave that for you all to see. If you have any questions after looking at the detailed capital worksheets for the vehicles. Before I get into the operating budget, I'll see if there's any questions on the fleet. On the operating budget, we handed out last week the last of the operating budget requests. So this was the memos and the spreadsheets. And as we've done for the first 2 work sessions, we'll open up for any questions, comments. There was a request that was put forth, I think it was the last work session, about space for commissioners, as well as compensation comparison. And then at the first work session, there was a request about how do employee salaries compare with other government employees within our labor shed. So we've got that information that we can hand out to you now. But other than that, we stand ready for any questions, comments, or requests to bring back to you for the future. Yes.
I may have missed it, but we asked for a spreadsheet of staff names and salaries. Was that, if that's included in the book, I've not been able to find it.
Okay. Let me. Lisa, can you answer the information that we can share as far as salaries per employee?
Yes, we can share names and salaries.
Okay, so we'll get that to you. Any other questions or comments or requests? Mayor, that completes our presentation. If you want to open up for public input, I don't know if the clerk received any comments or not.
I did not receive anything.
Does the board have any questions, comments?
Yes, so on C86,
Are you in the FY23 budget within the book?
yes. I'm assuming that's what it is. Unless
I'm with you. This is the governing board
Yeah.
spreadsheet? Yes, I'm with you.
okay. So, the FY '23 requested, is that a rollover somehow because there was no, under travel and training, is that a rollover because there was no NCLM conference in 2022? Or 21, rather?
What we have listed here, because there's been a robust participation by the board, particularly going to the league conference, we increased what was recommended last fiscal year. So you'll see a sizable increase between what is recommended in this budget compared to last budget. And that's a reflection of just how much participation that the commissioners have had in going to the League Vision Conference as well as the School of Government. But I don't know if that answered your question or not. There is no rollover.
Okay. So then what happened to the funds from so the FY '22 funds, that's the majority of that went to the NCLM conference?
I would not say that. There was a lot of participation in going to the conference. I wouldn't say that was the majority. We'd have to give you a breakdown of that. Whatever is not spent rolls into general fund balance, but I wouldn't say that the majority, without looking at the detail, I wouldn't say a majority of that was the league, but that was a sizable increase from last year.
Okay, all right. And then down at the bottom, it says hold for strategic plan grant funding, and then $5,000. Could you explain that a little bit?
I can. So the general statutes have changed considerably on who you can award funds to. So most specifically, you as a board are prohibited, or as a board member are prohibited from making a grant, as we've done in the past, to an organization if you are a member of that organization's board. And we have not brought back before you what a new policy would look like, and so we did not do the traditional grant application process like we did last year, but we went ahead and reserved the funds to allow you the chance to adopt a policy, and then if you adopt, the funds are still there.
Okay. And then the Citizens Academy, that's funding for running the program, and then it says supplies and celebration.
Yeah, so the grand plan is that we actually have a Citizens Academy. It's something along the lines of a 6 to 8 week long program where they come and they do a module per week, and maybe we offer 2 different options. One maybe a weekend class schedule, one maybe a weeknight class schedule. And when they've concluded going to all the modules, so like say police is one night, fire is the next week, they come before you at a graduation ceremony, so to speak. It's just a recognition of those citizens who have matriculated through the Citizens Academy.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Do we have anyone from the general public that would like to make a comment? Any additional comments? Requests? Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
There's still some information here.
Oh, okay.
that
I
we
was just
didn't-
going to give a
I think
preview. At your regular meeting on June 6th, you'll have a public hearing on the budget. We will then present you the budget ordinance for your deliberation.
Okay. We have a motion? We have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.